Hello everyone, welcome to my Resident Evil 6, no hope difficulty, no life cube loss walkthrough, and this is the final chapter of Chris's campaign. And this is going to be a very interesting video, because I messed up on the recording of this chapter. The big encounter with the Juavo, where they're pulling those switches to spawn in those BOWs, I messed up on the recording of that, because I forgot to press record while I was doing that section, so I unfortunately was not able to capture footage of that section with the resources that I had for this walkthrough. So what's going to happen instead is I'm going to show two different approaches to that strategy, using a very minimalist approach and also using the strategy that I would have used had I actually been using my resources correctly. So that's how that's going to be for that part. And also, I'm not going to get the S rank for Chapter 5 because there is one big encounter of Chapter 5 that I just kept dying on so many times, and it's the elevator encounter with Jake and Cherry. That has to be one of the hardest encounters I've ever done in this game, and it took so long for me to actually find a good strategy for that section. And the good news is I found a really good strategy, and ironically, it's the same strategy that Lightning used in his walkthrough of Resident Evil 6. Which, I didn't even know Lightning utilized a very similar method to what I used for that elevator sequence. So, what a coincidence, let me tell you. But, now we just need to call the elevator and send it to Piers. And Piers is such a pain in the ass for this section because he is so resistant to your commands. He will not follow what you're trying to do. I keep telling him to follow me, but he's so preoccupied with the enemies, and I don't know why. Look, I'm calling right now, but he keeps saying no. And it's such a pain to get him in here because he keeps trying to attack the enemies, and then there are times where even when he's in the elevator, he will do a dodge animation that will cause him to go out of the elevator. That didn't happen on this recording, but trust me guys, it happens in the blooper section, and I'm going to definitely put that particular piece of footage in my Poor Designs of Resident Evil 6 video series. But that's for later. Now we have this encounter right here, which this is pretty difficult because there are a lot of enemies. And I try to mutate them as best as I can so that they don't have guns. I mean, this is probably not the best strategy because what you can do is run all the way to the next room that has the two rocket launcher guys and then sit up in a power position. Or what you could do is just skip the enemies and then just get the kills you need for your S rank in the next encounter, which is where you have all those Juavos calling for those BOWs using the switches. And that could definitely work. Or you could just restart the checkpoint multiple times because, of course, your progress for killing the enemies is saved over each playthrough, even if you restart the checkpoint. So that can definitely be a good way of contributing to your S rank, but the other reason I failed the S rank was because of the time requirement, because I was spending so much time on that elevator sequence. But you'll notice right now that this whole entire area is being overcrowded with these enemies, and these enemies die very fast from the shotgun, and their weakness is the orange areas. But be very careful that you don't stand close to them, because when you shoot them by destroying that orange area, it causes them to explode, and it will damage other enemies, and even you. So, that's something you gotta bear in mind when you're trying to deal with these enemies. I mean, if you're wanting to avoid getting the mutations, but you also want a quick way of getting rid of these enemies, you could try to use the elbow that Chris does, in order to set the enemies up to being susceptible to a coup de grace, and then just do the neckbreaker on them to instantly kill them. But with the amount of enemies that have guns in this section, I don't really see how you can do that. I mean, what you could do is prioritize the guys that have the weapons and not mutate the guys that have the melee weapons, so that you are able to control the encounter better. But believe me guys, this is probably not the best way to do it. I highly recommend you just run to the rocket launcher area and try to get past them and then set up in a better position. That seems to work a little bit better than what I'm doing here. And you notice that the enemies aren't really trying to rush me. There's way more enemies than what's being shown right now. And also they have the ability to set up on that spot right there, and they can shoot you. You see, there's more of them. Like, this is a lot of enemies for a very small encounter like this. Seems a bit excessive. But I suppose that's just the case with a lot of the encounters in Chris's campaign. A lot of the encounters in Chris's campaign favor just putting in a lot of enemies, and you have to use your strategies well if you want to survive these sequences. But I see an opening to move, and now I'm just going to take it. And this room right here is kind of random with the rocket launcher guys, because there's no telling if there's going to be a guy just facing a wall and just shooting his rocket launcher. And the rocket launcher guys, they're not as good as the rocket launcher guys from Resident Evil 4 and Resident Evil 5. In Resident Evil 4, whenever the rocket launcher guys fired their rocket launchers, they only had one shot, so they would drop their rocket launchers after using them. In Resident Evil 5, whenever the rocket launcher guys fired their rocket launchers, they did a very lengthy reload animation, and you could stun them by shooting any part of their body, getting behind them, and then doing the neckbreaker. But on this game, the rocket launcher guys don't really have any kind of special characteristics to them. They practically have the exact same stun thresholds as the other Juavo, and they just don't die that fast, and they just fire their rocket launchers so fast, and they have multiple uses with their rocket launcher, so I'm not a big fan of this enemy type. But this is where the recordings of these sections are very different to what I was originally going to intend for this walkthrough. So let me show you the passive strategy, where I'm not going to fire as much of my weapons, because on this recording I didn't have a lot of ammo, because I had roughly the same amount of ammo that I had by the end of this chapter, and I didn't bother doing New Game Plus again to get different loot. So that's why I'm doing a very minimalist run on this section. But what I'm going to do is, when I'm trying to deal with the snipers, I'm going to mutate them rather than kill them in order to delay the spawn. The best way to mutate these guys is to shoot their arms. It will always cause a guaranteed mutation. And also, there is a set limit to the amount of enemies that can appear in this section, which is another reason why when you have low ammo, you'll want to prioritize mutating the enemies rather than killing them. But if they get some really bad mutations, that's a different story. And also, if your AI partner happens to kill any Juavo, and it causes the spawning of snipers, you need to get rid of them immediately. Or if they cause the spawning of other enemies with guns, you need to get rid of them as well. The snipers on this section are so bullcrap, and I have a lot of clips in my blooper section of me getting quick shot by these snipers. I really feel like the snipers on this section are worse than the snipers on the elevator sequence with Jake and Sherry, because at least with the strategy that I found for the elevator sequence, you won't have to run the gambit so much with snipers, and you can predict the spawns of the enemies generally in the elevator sequence, but this one, it's a little bit harder to predict. On my other strategy for this room here, I do prioritize killing the snipers, but only one sniper. That way I can cause snipers to spawn in on one side, but I'll explain it when I get to that other strategy. Because of the fact that the Juavos have pulled the switches, it's caused the spawning of these BOWs, and you'll mainly get Napods for this sequence rather than Gnezdos. I think there's only one Gnezdo that can appear. I don't know if you can have more than one appearing on this section. But you'll notice right now that the enemies are prioritizing Piers. This is really good. As long as they're prioritizing Piers and they're not focused on me, I can time out this whole entire sequence. I am still going to go out of my way to get rid of the guys with guns, because you'll notice that they can shoot me through the floor. And this works the opposite way as well. If I'm below them, they can shoot me through the floor as well. And right there, that guy is not dropping down. He's choosing to shoot me, so that's very dangerous. But I dropped down because the enemies are largely contained up there, and I'm just going to take the time to kill these enemies. And I'm just going to keep switching floors in order to ensure that the enemies don't close in on me. And that's all you really need to know about this minimalist strategy. I mean, I personally don't think it's the best strategy, because there is a lot of RNG that can happen. And given the number of enemies that are appearing in this section, if you get any moments where a cutscene appears, you are going to most likely get screwed by that cutscene, because there's so many enemies. And right now, these guys are closing in on me. There's the Gnezdo and the Napod. I was able to sneak by very easily, and there's a sniper just then. I'm very lucky that that sniper didn't try to quick shot me. Like, again, that's another RNG factor as well. Are you going to get screwed by the quick shot nature of these snipers? Like, there's just a lot of problems with this strategy, and that's why I don't approve of it. But what else are you supposed to do? Oh, look at that just then. See that? He was facing to the right, yet his laser was going at a right angle. Can you believe that that is a thing? I mean, a lot of games do this, but Resident Evil 6, why would Resident Evil 6 do that? I mean, Resident Evil 6 already favors some very bad designs, but I don't want to see another bad design like that. What is that? But anyway, the connection procedure has been completed, and now we just need to get out of here, and it's all highly dependent upon Piers. And one thing I don't like about Piers when it comes to getting him to get to a door is he never sprints. He always just jogs towards a door. Like right now, I'm expecting him to be sprinting, but he doesn't sprint. Every time I'm on this door, he never sprints. The same case with every single door that requires a co-op action. You'd think they would allow him to sprint, but they don't for some reason. But here's the next strategy that actually makes better use of the resources, and it's close to what I originally was going to intend for my walkthrough. So, right here, this is something I forgot to mention. After that cutscene ends, there is a high possibility that you might get sniped by that sniper very quickly, because he's moving during the cutscene. I mean, there are times when he gets to that spot early, but then there are other times when he gets to that spot late. There's no consistency with that. Although I think maybe when you restart the checkpoint, he's more prone to inconsistent behavior, but when you're just doing it upon first starting the encounter, I think it's different. I could be wrong though, maybe there could be moments where he gets to that spot very quickly on the first instance of starting this encounter. But what I'm going to do is, after killing that sniper, I'm going to remain in this half of the area. And I'm going to clear out the enemies. And do you notice the guys that have the green eyes? The guys that have the green eyes are the ones that will go for the switches. So you have got to pay attention to Carla's dialogue, because oftentimes they appear at specific moments in Carla's dialogue. So just then, if you were paying attention to the subtitles, you'll know exactly when you're supposed to move. And the best way to deal with them is to shoot them in the leg while they're running, to knock them over, and then stomp them. If you're not able to do that, try using a high-powered weapon. I mean, the green-eyed guys are very resistant to quick shots for some reason. They do not get stunned so easily by quick shots. I think that's mainly because you're hitting them from the side most of the time, because they're running past you, and you end up hitting their arm. But I think the quick shot should always be a guaranteed stun. It sucks that there are moments where it doesn't stun enemies properly because of the way the flinch animations work on certain body parts, and especially during specific circumstances. But do not do this. Do not mark enemies. Piers is very slow to go after enemies, and if he accidentally prioritizes the snipers, that's a big problem. Because what I did was, when I killed that first sniper, it caused these two snipers right here to be on the other side, and they can't hit me as long as I stay right over here, right in direct line of sight with that door. So in between the door and this structure to my right. Here comes another guy with green eyes, so I'm just going to shoot him in the leg, and I'm going to stomp him. And then on this second phase right here, there's a lot more enemies, so you'll need to clear them out to the best of your ability. So I'm going to use a shotgun in order to get rid of them as quickly as possible to ensure that they're not going to mess this up. That guy mutates, unfortunately, so I'm going to have to try something different. That's just the main problem when you have an AI system that is as keen on trying to shoot enemies. They always hit body parts that you don't want them to shoot, and they always end up mutating them. That's just something you're going to have to deal with when you're dealing with the AI on this game, which I've already said many times is significantly inferior to Resident Evil 5's AI system. And I don't know why so many people say the AI on this game is so much better, but they're idiots. Don't believe them. They're fake Resident Evil players, and they know nothing about AI systems. Like, at least Fascinator understands that the AI in Resident Evil 5 is so much better than the AI in Resident Evil 6, and he's well aware of the flaws of the AI systems, but he's not going out of his way to just be openly critical about the AI systems in Resident Evil 5. Like, he already knows that the AI in Resident Evil 5 is very capable compared to the AI in this game. And that is just the greatest example of someone who actually looks at the AI properly. But sadly, that's just not the case with everyone else. And this is the end of the second phase, and now we just need to get to the door. And I'm going to call Piers over so that he's by the door quickly, and I won't get screwed by the cutscenes too much. And this is the end of this encounter. This is the strategy that I wanted to include in my walkthrough, but sadly, I wasn't able to get the recording. And now for the dreaded elevator sequence. That isn't so dreaded anymore, now that I've actually found a really good strategy, and it involves the grenade launcher. And I stressed so much in my previous videos that you need to save the grenade launcher rounds for sequences like this. So when you're on the chopper boss fight in Chapter 3, make sure you're saving up on your grenade rounds for sequences like this. Because the strategy is going to involve me using the grenade launcher to stop any enemies from dropping down on my platform, and also for clearing out any snipers or rocket launcher guys. And if I had more ammo, I would be able to deal with them easily. I mean, I do have acid rounds, but acid rounds are nowhere near as good as the normal grenade rounds. And if you're trying to kill enemies with the grenade launcher, you have to make sure you make direct contact with them. If you just hit an enemy via splash damage from the grenade launcher, it doesn't kill them. And there is a possibility that it might trigger a mutation, so you need to be careful of that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up with Jake on this elevator. You need to get on this elevator. This is important, because the spawns are easier to deal with. And I'm just going to go prone in this corner right here, and I'm just going to shoot them with the grenade launcher. I need to pay close attention. So after 3 waves of these enemies, I'm going to go over to where the switch was, and I'm just going to hug that side so that I can take care of a sniper. That's the one guaranteed spot where I know a sniper is going to appear. And I'm making my way towards him right now. So I'm just going to clear out this next wave of enemies, and I'm going to go to the other side, and I'm going to prep my grenade launcher to deal with him. This elevator is so much better because you're not dealing with so many enemies, and there aren't as many snipers on this elevator. On the other elevator, however, there are a lot more enemies you're dealing with, and the chances of running into a sniper are exceedingly high. And I always take Jake with me because not only do I like the dialogue that occurs between Chris and Jake, and I feel like if that dialogue didn't exist, Chris's campaign just wouldn't end the same way, but I feel like Jake is a little bit more aggressive than Piers on this encounter. I mean, I could be wrong, but that's just what I felt on my multiple playthroughs of this section. And Jake does have access to some pretty good weapons, and his martial arts can be helpful at times. And altogether, I really feel like he's beneficial in allowing this strategy to work. He's practically my good luck charm for this section. And I'm just going to be killing the rest of the enemies. I don't have any more grenade rounds, so I need to be extra cautious. And there's that sniper who's aiming at me, so I need to dodge like crazy. I am very lucky that he is not trying to quick-shot me. He could have quick-shot me at that distance. I've seen it happen with many of the snipers on this game, where they can quick-shot you at a range that shouldn't even be possible to quick-shot anyone from. But that guy is doing whatever he's doing. I don't really understand the whole point of that, because it's just a failed mutation. He just sprouts wings for a little bit, and then he just reverts back to normal. Doesn't really add anything to the encounter, so I don't really understand the point of it. But since I don't have the grenade launcher, I'm going to use my assault rifle, and he mutates, so I'm going to have to maintain my distance from this guy. And the way you want to deal with this enemy is to just walk towards him, but of course, right here I can't do that because his explosion has a lot of range. And that is the end of this encounter. Once we get up to this floor and you're not seeing any more doors, we're going to move on to the boss fight with Chaos. And the boss fight with Chaos is a lot of fun. I really enjoy it. The first fight is very easy because it's designed for knife only. They want you to use a knife in order to save up on your resources for Chaos in the final encounter with him. And Chaos goes down very fast in the final encounter. But right now we're going into a fixed camera moment, so I need to talk about this real quick. There are people who have told me that they have died many times on these fixed camera moments in Resident Evil 6, but I'm just like, if you can handle the fixed camera angles in the older Resident Evil games, why would this be any different? I have never died once on these fixed camera moments right here, so I don't know what those people are talking about. They obviously suck at this game, or they probably are just saying that just to make the older Resident Evil games a lot more appealing. But how do you mess up on something as simple as this? The controls work properly. There isn't a moment, like in Resident Evil 1 Remastered, the Resident Evil 0 Remastered, where when you're using the alternate controls, and you're swapping between the camera angles that the alternate controls to screw up, because they actually programmed the controls correctly in these fixed camera moments, and overall, they work fine. I especially like the cinematic approach. This is exactly how the fixed camera angle should work in the older Resident Evil games. It should be very seamless, but the older Resident Evil games' fixed camera angles were horrible. And I've gone into detail so many times about the failures of the fixed camera angles in the older Resident Evil games. I mean, the only older Resident Evil game that has really good fixed camera angles is Resident Evil Code Veronica, because the fixed camera angles were very seamless, and the cameras often tracked with you, just like what's happening right now in Resident Evil 6. Both of these games handle fixed camera angles far better than the older Resident Evil games. And I especially like the use of the fixed camera angle for this chase sequence right here, because I think it really makes Chaos feel threatening, and they utilize the camera angles at the right moments. And I like the music that plays here as well. I think the music that plays here, plus the use of this chase sequence, really makes this feel like a tense encounter, and it gives me the chills. Like, this is scarier than anything in Resident Evil 1 or Resident Evil 2 Remake, or any of the older Resident Evil games for that matter. At least this section complements survival horror in the sense that if these characters didn't have the kind of capabilities that they have right now, they would never be able to encounter any such BOW like this. And it's survival horror accounting for all possible scenarios demonstrated in this case right here. And just think as well, if the older Resident Evil characters were to be in any of the sequences as shown in Resident Evil 4, 5, and 6, they would never survive. That's why I can never understand why people hate it when characters evolve in survival horror games, and why they always like it when the character is always the same as they were before in their original game. Because if they do that, then there's no evolution in the enemy design, there's no evolution in attack designs, there's no evolution in the kind of sections that you encounter in the sequels. And that is just something that a lot of survival horror games just get wrong, and it's something that Resident Evil doesn't try to do, because they always try to evolve each game as the series progresses, but they just didn't do that in Resident Evil 2 Remake. And a lot of people might argue that Resident Evil 7 compromise the overall evolution of the gameplay, but that is not true at all. The gameplay in Resident Evil 7 still maintains the overall designs that define what a Resident Evil game is, and they even took risks with the gameplay. I mean, the first-person perspective, biggest risk ever, among other risks. But I'm not going to go into so much detail because I've already explained this in my other videos, but let's just focus on what's happening right now. So, we're currently encountering Heios, and as I said before, this is a fight that's designed for knife only, because he has a lot of life, his moveset is very simple, and you can use the knife intelligently to save up on your ammunition. And this is another thing as well that differentiates the newer version of Resident Evil from the older version of Resident Evil. A lot of people would say that the older Resident Evil games were more focused on ammo management and that ammunition was actually critical in those games, but this is only true in Resident Evil Code Veronica. Every other Resident Evil game you could get done with just a knife, and that really is where the survival horror doesn't really apply, because when the knife is really your only option because every other weapon just isn't that reliable, or just turns the game into New Game Plus whenever you're using all the weapons, it turns the older Resident Evil games into action games pretty much, when you're just relying on one tool that is actually very useful. And when they make the enemies very simple in their designs, and they make it very easy to run past them, it really becomes a speedrun game at that point. And speedruns are heavily associated with action games. And I mean, I've already touched upon this many times, but I really feel like the newer Resident Evil games make ammo feel critical, because you need to use each weapon for specific sequences if you want to survive. Like, if you look at Resident Evil 7 with the Not a Hero DLC, if you don't have specific ammunition for certain sections, you are dead. It's very easy to fail in those sequences. Same in Resident Evil 6, like, look at the amount of times I've had to use specific weapons for specific sequences in order to have a better time, in order to make sure the gameplay isn't so severely compromised, in order to ensure that I'm going to survive the sequence. And this application of this perception towards the sections further complements the idea that ammunition is actually more important in the newer Resident Evil games than in the older Resident Evil games. And that is what I'm trying to do right here. I'm using the knife for this sequence in order to ensure that I have enough ammunition for Heios at the end, because Heios is a lot more dangerous than what he is right now. And furthermore, given his simplistic moveset, it leads to the idea that I should probably use the knife and save up on my other resources, because if I'm using the guns on a very simple boss like this, then that's just a waste of ammo, when I can easily use something that's not going to drain my ammunition. And that is the skill involved in knowing how to properly assess situations in these newer types of Resident Evil games. And I'm not saying this boss is bad. I really like this boss. I love the music. You know, I oftentimes end up feeling very emotional during these moments, and I think just seeing Chris's journey throughout all of Resident Evil 6, and then having him face something like Heios with the kind of abilities that he has, it almost leads to just a symbolic representation of Chris Redfield during this whole entire game. You know, I almost feel like Heios is the representation of Chris's bad side, and just the way Heios hides inside of a shell in order to heal himself, and just the way he uses acid in order to damage everyone. You know, it's almost like Chris is facing his worst enemy, which is himself, and it's this worst side of him that causes him to lose a lot of his men, and he lost Piers in the process because Piers had to sacrifice himself in order to save Chris. And it was another emotional moment that I definitely think was pretty good in this game, in my opinion. I mean, I'm probably the only one who thinks about Heios this way, because of just the way it's all represented, and with the music that's playing, and just a lot of other aspects. But I think it's just really cool to think of it like that. But I didn't really explain the first boss fight that well, but like I said before, it's very simple. All I did was stand in front of Heios to get him to do his acid attack, and because he gains a lot of forward momentum, he's able to go right past me and miss me. And I'm able to knife him during his active frame period, and also during his recovery period. And using the quick stab technique, I'm able to speed up that fight and save up on all my resources for this final boss fight with him. And that's all you need to know about that. But there's one last chase sequence that we need to do before we get to the boss fight. And this is the part where a lot of people say they died, but I don't see how. It makes no sense. This doesn't last very long. How can you possibly die during this moment? It's almost like that final boss fight with Jack Baker from Resident Evil 7. A lot of people say on my video that they have so much trouble with the last phase of that boss fight on Madhouse difficulty, but how? What is so hard about identifying which hand Jack is using and then moving to the correct side? Like, I don't understand these people at all. And it's ridiculous just how many people have said that to me in my Resident Evil 7 Madhouse difficulty final fight with Jack Baker boss fight video. Like, one guy had even posted on my video saying that he had to use a cheat engine to understand what I was doing in order to dodge Jack. This guy is an absolute moron. Like, Jack only does 2 attacks in the final phase. Why do you need a cheat engine to identify something like that? I don't understand these people. There's no logic in what they're saying. None of what they're saying makes any sense at all. And then people are saying that the fixed camera moments in Resident Evil 6 are so hard to deal with. Idiots. Dumb people. They really piss me off to no end. Even though they're not saying anything offensive to me, but I'm just like, why are these people struggling to comprehend something that isn't exactly rocket science? It's something so basic. It just doesn't make any sense. And the fact that it's occurring in so many individuals that can't comprehend something as basic as that is just surprising and shocking. Incredibly shocking that people can just be that oblivious to something as simple as that. I don't know. I'm not gonna dwell on it. Let's just get started on this boss fight, because there are some pretty important things to know when you're trying to deal with this boss as Chris. Because, of course, Pierce is your AI partner, and this boss fight relies very heavily on what he does. So, the main gist of Hayas's boss fight is you need to destroy the weak spots that are on his side, and this will cause him to be bisected. And when he's bisected, his lower half will come after you. So you need to get the lower half to hit your AI partner, because of course they cannot die, and then after it's destroyed, you need to get Pierce to stand up, and then while he's aiming, you need to use the move in command to get him to do his charge attack, so that he will break Hayas's shell, and then once Hayas's shell is broken, you need to run towards Hayas, press R2, and then do the execution animation, and you will destroy one of his vital organs. You have to destroy 3 of his vital organs if you want to end this fight. So you see right here, he's standing up, he's aiming, and I use the move in command, and then he fires. That will work really well. However, there are times where Pierce will be knocked out by the lower half of the torso, but he still remains prone while aiming. And the way you bypass that is to use the follow command, where you hold circle and you press down the D-pad to force him to stand up. That's the best way to get him to stand up, because he cannot do the charge attack while he's prone, and most of the time he resorts to using his normal attack, and his normal attack isn't enough to destroy the shell. I don't know if Chris has the ability to damage the shell, but I would assume not, because it would probably take a lot of ammunition, given that C-virus-based mutations are weak to electricity. But a couple other important things to note about Hayas. Some of the hitboxes on his attacks are a little weird. Like, for instance, there's one attack that he does where he slams his hand into the ground, and tentacles come out of it, and then the tentacles will just spread out greatly. But the weirdest thing is that there is a lingering hitbox on that move, but it doesn't show itself until 3 seconds after the animation is complete. So nothing happens within that interval, but then after the 3 seconds are up, if you're close to Hayas, you'll just get hit by nothing. It's very odd. I've never seen a hitbox work like that, but at least it's only with one move. His other moves are pretty fair. And you can use the fact that his close range attacks are very easy to dodge in order to hit his weak spots. And the shotgun is very useful for destroying his weak spots. One hit from the shotgun will destroy his weak spots. And also, flash grenades are very useful against Hayas. I didn't realize this until after I did this recording, because I thought the flash grenades would do nothing against him, but it turns out it's a hard stun, and it stuns him for a very long time, so you're able to hit these weak spots very easily. One thing you need to bear in mind about these weak spots is that you never want to destroy the weak spots whenever Hayas is on top of a structure, because if Hayas goes into his shell on top of the structure, Pierce will never be able to destroy the shell, and you will not be able to destroy the vital organs. So you have to always make sure that Hayas is back on the ground level before you decide to destroy the weak spots. And that is the end of Hayas' boss fight. And I have to say, guys, that dying wail that Hayas does sounds very sad. And then that plus the music definitely triggers an emotional response within me. And I thought I'd bring that up because it's very rare for a game to do that with me. And it's very ironic considering that Hayas is the most dangerous BOW ever faced by the Resident Evil characters. Considering that if Hayas were to be let loose onto the world, it could easily infect the entire world with the C-virus. That and Chaos is near immortal. So it's very interesting that I get an emotional response from that. Never thought I would actually feel bad for something so dangerous like that. But that's just me. But now we just need to get out of here, and Piers is going to do all the work here. And the pods will not have enough time to kill you. It's very simple. And it's pretty cool. But once we have gotten over to the door, that will be the end of Chapter 5, and this will conclude Chris's campaign in its entirety. But before I leave, I am going to showcase a very long set of bloopers, because the amount of problems that I encountered when I was doing this chapter was a lot, and most of them involve quick shooting snipers, and it begins right now. So this is the first one right here. So look at this. So I'm going to get quick shot by this guy. See that? No laser at all. And then here's slow motion of a split-second laser. And then this right here, the laser isn't even on me and it still gets me. And then right here, another quick shooting sniper gets me. Look at that bullcrap right there. And what do we have here? Look at that, another quick shooting sniper. So yeah, for anyone who says the zombies with guns are worse than the Juavos, you people don't know what you're talking about. But right here, this guy doesn't choose the mantle, he just chooses to shoot me for some reason. And we have another sniper that just quick shots me. Look at that distance, there's no way you should be able to quick shot me. And I don't know if it's because the laser's bugged, like you'll notice he's aiming at me, but the laser isn't showing, and that might have something to do with it. Maybe the laser's bugged on this game. Then again, I have had moments where snipers have been able to shoot me instantly after they have successfully prepped their animation. So maybe that's not the real reason as to why this problem is so bad. But you'll notice right here, Piers is being a nuisance in this section. He's just being so incompetent with actually following my commands. And yeah, that right there is one of the greatest examples of how incompetent the AI is on this game, and why people, when they're saying that the AI in Resident Evil 5 is worse than this AI system, they don't know what they're talking about at all. But this is the end of Chris's campaign, so stay tuned for the future campaigns. I have successfully recorded Jake's campaign in its entirety, so I will definitely focus on that campaign right now. Thank you all for watching, and you take care now.